In the rough and unforgiving land of the 1800s Wild West, a woman named Margaret was led to the auction block like cattle. She had been widowed young, and her late husband's family deemed her useless because she bore no children. Desperate for coin, they sold her to the highest bidder. Her veil shaded her face as men in dusty hats shouted numbers. Humiliation burned through her, but she kept her head high. Among the bidders stood Samuel Carter, a rancher known for his honesty. He did not need a wife, but he carried a baby girl in his arms. Samuel had lost his wife during childbirth 2 years before. Since then, he struggled to raise little Emily while managing his cattle ranch. He had not come to the auction for a bride, yet when he saw Margaret's eyes, dignified despite her shame, something stirred. While other men treated her as property, Samuel raised his hand and offered enough to silence the crowd. The auctioneer slammed his gavel, declaring her sold. Margaret stiffened, expecting cruelty, but when Samuel approached, he simply tipped his hat and said, "You don't belong on that stage. Come with me if you're willing." Margaret followed him onto his wagon, heart racing. She had heard stories of men who bought women only to use or discard them. But Samuel's arms were occupied with the child and his gaze was steady, not lustful. Emily, golden curls under her bonnet, reached for Margaret's hand. Something within Margaret melted as the baby smiled. The journey to his ranch was silent but filled with questions she dared not ask. When they arrived, the wooden house stood tall against rolling fields, a home carved from determination. Samuel carried Emily inside and gestured for Margaret to follow. That night, Samuel made his intentions clear. He placed a plate of stew before her and said, "I didn't bring you here as property. I brought you because Emily needs a woman's care, and you deserve better than being sold." Margaret stared, unsure if kindness in men truly existed. He continued, "I won't force you to stay, but if you choose to, this home can be yours as much as mine." Tears filled her eyes. For years she had been shamed for what she couldn't give, children. Now, a child was offered into her arms, not demanded from her. Days turned into weeks, and Margaret found herself growing attached to Emily. She sang lullabies while hanging laundry on the line, mended Samuel's shirts, and cooked meals that brought warmth to the ranch. Samuel, though reserved, treated her with quiet respect. He spoke to her not as a servant but as a partner. The neighbors whispered. Some mocked Samuel for buying a barren wife. Others sneered that Margaret had no worth. But inside the Carter ranch, laughter returned. Emily's giggles filled the halls, and Margaret began to smile again, rediscovering the woman she had thought the world had buried. One evening, while fixing a fence, Samuel noticed a group of ranch hands nearby speaking crudely about Margaret's past. Anger surged in him. He strode over, fists clenched, and warned, "Speak that way again and you'll answer to me." His voice carried the authority of a man who had defended his land from outlaws. The hands fell silent. That night, Margaret overheard Emily call her mama for the first time. The word broke her heart wide open. She wept quietly, holding Emily close while Samuel watched from the doorway, knowing his decision at the auction had been right. But life on the frontier was never free from hardship. One summer, drought swept through Dust Valley, leaving the land parched and cattle weak. Samuel worked from dawn till dusk, sweat soaking his shirt, trying to keep his ranch alive. Margaret, refusing to be idle, joined him in the fields, carrying water, tending livestock, and keeping Emily safe. Townsfolk were astonished at her grit. She had once been cast aside as useless, yet here she was, stronger than many men. Samuel noticed the fire in her spirit, and each day his admiration deepened into something more than respect. Danger struck when rustlers raided nearby ranches. One night, Samuel spotted shadows creeping near the cattle pens. Gunshots cracked across the night air as he confronted the thieves. Margaret, clutching Emily, lit lanterns to blind the attackers, giving Samuel the edge. The outlaws fled into the desert, but not before one bullet grazed Samuel's arm. Margaret rushed to his side, tearing her dress to bandage the wound. "You could have been killed," she whispered, trembling. Samuel looked into her eyes and said, "I'd risk everything for this ranch, but more for you two." Margaret's heart pounded, realizing she was truly loved. Months later, autumn leaves colored the valley gold. Margaret stood on the porch, Emily in her arms, watching Samuel bring in the herd. She no longer felt like a woman discarded. She was a wife, a mother, and a partner in survival. Samuel joined her, taking Emily into his embrace. "You've given me more than I ever hoped for," he said. Margaret shook her head. But I was sold because I couldn't conceive. Samuel smiled softly. Children come in many ways. Emily was given to me and you were given to us. That's family enough. Years passed and the Carter Ranch prospered. Margaret's name was no longer whispered in scorn but spoken with respect. She became known as the woman who turned disgrace into strength. Emily grew under her care, thriving with both a father's guidance and a mother's love. Whenever Margaret thought of that cruel auction block, she remembered the moment Samuel reached out, not to own her but to save her. In the Wild West, where survival meant more than bloodlines, love became their legacy. She was no longer the widow who couldn't conceive. She was Margaret Carter, matriarch of Dust Valley.